Group to talk about what needs to be done to reform policing and the justice system in this country. I'm joined by an array of people here. Cyrus Vance Jr., the Manhattan District Attorney. Michael Nutter, Mayor of Philadelphia. Chuck Canterbury, Chair of the Fraternal Order of Police. And Charles Ramsey, the Philadelphia Police Commissioner, who this week was appointed by the President to co-chair his task force on 21st century policing. Mr. Ramsey, let me start with you. Your mandate from the President, what do you believe you've got to accomplish to show that one of these task forces can be more than just talk?
Well, first, let me say that the President is very serious about this issue. That's why he put together the task force as a part of other initiatives that he has going on right now. We have 90 days to come up with some concrete recommendations to the President on how we can have change, positive change in policing, starting with establishing trust. I was listening to comments earlier in your program, and it's very troubling that people do not believe there's fairness in the way in which we police, the way in which cases are reviewed by prosecutors, on and on and on. And we've got to change that dynamic, and we've got to take a look at our training, and more importantly, the education that we provide to officers so they better understand the role of police in a democratic society. And those are the kinds of things we'll be focusing on, as well as use of force and technology.
Well, Mr. Canterbury, let me go to you represent rank and file police officers, the beat cop.
That's right.
The reforms. What do you want to see the President's task force tackle? If you were asked to be in this task force, what would you be saying? Okay, let's not indict all police officers here, but this is what I think the police need.
Well, first of all, we believe that the existing judicial system works. The grand jury system and police review boards in certain cities have shown some promise. But the bottom line is, rank and file police officers have always wanted more training and welcome that training. I don't believe that under current economic times, with the huge reduction in law enforcement officers around this country, that training has kept up. But I also don't believe that there's a systemic problem in law enforcement. I believe that the media and others have taken a couple of incidents. There are 14 million arrests in this country every year, and we have less than 300 police officers that have been indicted for excessive force since 2009.
But there is a trust gap. You acknowledge that,
absolutely a trust gap. But it takes a holistic approach. It's not just law enforcement's problem. The common denominator is poverty. In every country in the world where there's a economic problem in a neighborhood,
then you have a crime.
You have a higher crime, and then people like the mayor who have to send us in to deal with the problems.
Mr. Vance, I think another issue here has to do with the relationship between district attorneys and police officers. Can district attorneys fairly assess a police officer who is under suspicion, in this case with the police officer in Staten Island, of potentially having committed a crime? Can a DA truly fairly prosecute that case in front of a grand jury?
Chuck, thank you first of all for having me, and I'd also like to extend my condolences to Mrs. Garner and her family for their loss. In answer to your question, Chuck, police officers and prosecutors need to be collaborative, but not cozy. We have a responsibility as district attorneys to investigate and, where appropriate, prosecute police officers. During my 5 years in the DA's office, we prosecuted approximately 16 or 17 police officers for cases ranging from lying on predicate facts about stop and frisk to perjury to rape. So we have to work together. But I think the moment that we have is something that we should not lose the opportunity. There is much more we can do that is better. In terms of both policing and in terms of prosecutors being more transparent and communicative about how we should do our job. In our office, and I also think we need to be self-reflective and understand, do we have
special prosecutors outside of your office? Should your office not handle a potential police officer indictment? Should it be cordoned off? Should it be a Justice Department, maybe a state office that handles this?
Chuck, I'm completely open to discussing what kind of special prosecutor program might be instituted, but be aware for what you ask for. Special prosecutors who've been appointed in the past are accountable to no one.
Right.
And when you're not accountable to anyone, as a DA is to the electorate, you're likely to get a special prosecutor, Ken Starr, for example, who can go off for years expending millions in public dollars without result.
Mayor Nutter, there's, I think, another debate here was interesting. The conservative columnist John Podhoretz openly wondered, is it time to move on from the broken windows style of policing, right? And broken window style of policing was back during the 90s, and this is what he wrote. This inspired strategy helped save New York City and a lot of other cities. Its adoption across the country helped save the nation from the most pressing domestic problem it faced from the 60s to the 90s. But we're now into our third decade of the crime drop, and the simple fact of the matter is that broken windows logic doesn't work in the same way it did in the 90s. The criminal class that made New York City a disastrous place to live has been rendered ineffectual. Crime is down and has remained low because the crooks are in jail and have stayed in jail. The low-hanging fruit was picked, and so too was the fruit that hung higher. The meaning is that maybe the way to police petty crimes should change. Do you believe that?
Well, I think one of the reasons Police Commissioner Ramsey was picked for the President's task force, it's 21st century policing. What does policing mean in the 21st century? I don't think we ever want to completely get away from just allowing people to do some set of random things on a regular basis and just say, well, we're willing to accept that level of crime, but then all of a sudden we're going to shift to, I mean, where do you draw the line? What's the threshold? I mean, at some point, wrong.
You as a mayor, you can't ever accept any level of crime. Is that your mindset? Is the ideal? Okay.
You can never accept criminal activity, but there are gradations. And the issue is, we go back to the issues of training and experience and what's in the officer's mind and what about perceptions and any amount of bias that any of us bring to our respective jobs. I mean, we've seen now two incidents. We've had two of the worst weeks in American history in recent times.
For law enforcement.
What are the joining factors?
Right.
Two large black men are dead as a result of engagement with the police. And so we have to look at what else is going on with the officers. What are they thinking about? What are some of their fears? What are community fears? I mean, you in essence have the citizens who want to be protected who are now increasingly afraid of the police. And you have some police officers who are increasingly afraid of the community. There is a large gap in that context. And so it is about training. People need the police to protect them. I support my police officers back in Philadelphia. This is a dangerous job. They interact with some really bad people.
There's no such thing as a routine traffic stop, right, Mr. Canterbury?
Routine traffic stops can turn into really bad things.
Absolutely. There's no such thing as anything routine in law enforcement.
Quickly, Mr. Ramsey, how do you keep bias out of the Philadelphia police force?
Well, I mean, listen, everybody has bias, but let me just real quickly comment on that, the notion that we need to get away from broken windows type policing. I think we can do both. One of my deputies mentioned something at a staff meeting the other day, and that is that there's been a lot of research in policing about effectiveness of strategies, hotspot policing, foot patrols, things of that nature, but very little, if any, on the after effects of such strategies in terms of alienation of communities. And that's what we have to take a look at. What's the collateral damage that's caused when we engage in certain policing strategies? If we know that and understand it, we can avoid it. And so I think you can do both effectively, but we have to be able to deal with a range of issues, from simple disorder type things to serious crime.
Mr. Vance, very quick.
As far as bias goes, fair and impartial policing and education of police officers in that regard.
All right, this has to be the last comment. I know you've done a lot of research on bias.
Recognizing that prosecutors have to be aware of what may be in their own office. We brought the Vera Institute of Justice in, a nonpartisan criminal justice think tank, to evaluate our practices in plea bargaining, charging, and bail to determine whether or not there was any racial bias present. And I think it's a sensible thing for a modern-day prosecutor's office to do, particularly in metropolitan areas.
All right. Thank you all. This is a conversation that obviously could continue for hours coming up. If you think Washington politicians don't